This is Ricardo Diaz once again with CU Immigration Forum TV. And we welcome you this day because as we go through the many issues, facets of immigration, we finally get to doing some of the academic frames and all the details that would go as to why immigration is good for our communities and what kinds of effects, and hopefully situate you as to what's going on nationally and then in our state. So for that, we have our good friend, Professor Stacy Harwood, that is here. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
A pleasure to have you here.
I'm glad to be here.
Stacy and I have actually, I think it's all because of immigration. That's how we've crossed paths.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, it's good. It's been a good 3-4 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting part for me is that in CU Immigration, as we have students, faculty, of people of different sorts, academics tend to stay quiet. You know what's going on, but you're observing, taking notes. I don't know, but it comes to me as a surprise when you're speaking out, because I get to see what I normally see, but with a different lens.
Yep.
And so today, we want to talk about a little bit about you. You were doing immigration. Where are you? You're at the U of I.
Well, let's see. Yeah, when I was doing my master's degree, I was interested in issues related, broader than immigration,
Okay.
sort of community development, affordable housing. But being in Southern California, immigration was hard to ignore, and it was always embedded in everything that I was looking at. So I started paying attention to things such as small local controversies about the way people use space, and I noticed that some of those issues were related to different cultural practices, people's class backgrounds, and that's kind of what led me into starting to focus on immigration.
But not on immigration on well, it is the social side, but it's not sociology.
No. I mean, I was very interested in the way that we use local legislation. So public policy, ordinances, different kinds of health codes, the way those things get enacted to sort of establish norms in a community, and those became contested as more and more immigrants began moving into the community.
Okay, so the place of immigrants in those contexts.
Mm-hmm.
But then you do your doctoral work in not directly related to immigrants.
It was in the context of a community rapidly changing because of immigration. So neighborhoods were changing. Some neighborhoods were doubling, tripling in population. So there was a huge impact on those neighborhoods. So the context of my dissertation was looking at how neighborhood associations and the local government interacted in that context.
But that was not a couple of years ago.
No. Well, I finished in 2001. So.
2001. So it's been 11, 12 years now doing academic work and here at the U of I, but before then?
Well, I worked in local government and with nonprofits, working with immigrants, actually. So I did a lot of work with, helping neighborhood groups organize and engage in the local residents. So sometimes it was difficult because you have non-English speakers and Spanish, and then people who only speak English, and trying to get those groups to work together. So I was doing, a little bit of community work before I started focusing more on the academic.
And then you came to the U of I.
Yep, after I graduated with my PhD from the University of Southern California, I got a job here, and I've been here ever since.
But in which department? What kind of work?
I'm an associate professor in urban and regional planning.
Urban and regional planning. So in fact, I meant to call our regional planners, but maybe we'll take this video to them and then
they're very excited. They're very excited about this. I've already been talking to some of the local planners, and they're eager to see,
Excellent.
find out more about what we're doing.
So excellent. So if you don't mind, maybe I'll ask them to come and then comment on your presentation.
Oh, that would be terrific. I think I could find a few that would love to do that.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. Good. So regional planning, and at the U of I, that department then, the immigration section, how does it fit in, or are you it, or how does that?
Actually, there are a number of people interested in immigration. I would say probably we have a lot of students interested in community development, issues around social justice, and I would say a good number of those students and faculty that are in that kind of subfield are interested in immigration.
Okay.
Yeah, at the local level, not so much national politics, but sort of, what does it mean when you have a diverse population? How do you provide, the range of services that everyone needs? How do you address different issues of conflict between neighbors? All kinds of things.
Yeah, and so those issues, I think that we saw each other, we might have met at the conference were you presenting on Effingham or somebody was? I remember Effingham coming up as one of the topic, one of the communities that was being studied at a conference, and you were presenting.
Maybe it was a while ago. I don't remember actually. Sorry.
Well, you've done work in Illinois communities too. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, mostly it's been here in Urbana, Champaign. I've been working with the CU Immigration Forum in the most sort of last 2 years. Before that, working with a smaller group to address some of the concerns about the Secure Communities program that was established in Champaign County. And through various conversations with the sheriff and different community meetings, the group was able to put some pressure perhaps on the sheriff to not strictly enforce that program.
I like to think that we gave him options, and he saw.
Yeah.
In fact, I think even his statement to the, I think it might have been his staff. His legal opinion is that this policy, as he now has instituted it, works and it's safe, and that's the right thing to do too.
Yeah, I think he also just saw the impact of arresting people without a license wasn't really a priority for the sheriff, and it cost the department resources, and so I think that also was a factor.
Yeah. So we have some sites to show, and so I'd like to show first a couple of your papers, and if you'll give me just a little intro as how that fits into how you came to be here. So this one is in 05, struggling to embrace difference in land use decision-making in multicultural communities. Tell me a little bit about this.
Sure. Well, after I graduated from USC, I kind of redirected my research to focus specifically on local policymaking. That is, things that are being passed by city councils or planning commissions that relate to the immigrant community. And my focus was on things that had a bit of an anti-immigrant sentiment to it. Sometimes it was very explicit, sometimes it was a bit more subtle. So I started doing a set of case studies focusing on California cities, just because I had my connections there, and that's where I really started a lot of my work. And so that paper in particular goes through a couple of cases and kind of basically unpacks the process.
Okay.
Trying to look at both the explicit issues and then the sort of underlying issues that were less talked about. But certainly they were embedded in the letters to the council or an email to a staff person from the community. People were very concerned. Residents were really concerned about the changes they were seeing.
Which is normal.
Right, and that's something that I talked a lot about with professionals, is that change is hard, no matter what.
Yeah.
And there is a settling in time, and so usually there's a really strong response to rapid demographic change.
Yeah, in whichever way it might happen, and immigrants may not be then.
Right.
And then this paper then, it was this next one, Planning in the Face of Anti-Immigrant Sentiment, Latino Immigrants and Land Use in the Conflicts in Orange County. That's also Anaheim, maybe. Is this before or after the other one?
Well, it draws on the same set of case studies, but it focuses, unlike the other one, this one solely focuses on Latino immigrants. The other one has Vietnamese immigrants and Latino immigrants. So I try to just focus on some of the issues that were coming up for the Latino community. So they're a little bit different, each immigrant group. The conflicts within the community vary based on sort of cultural practices, social class, how well integrated they are, or how quickly they integrate or not. So this was for a book that was actually focusing on urban planning and the Latino community. So it was also, so mine focused on the anti-immigrant sentiment, but other pieces in that book focus on more positive things that were going on in urban planning.
Well, and that also gives us then a little bit more as to where we hope to take today as part of this discussion is the positive, the contributions, the changes, demographic and economic and everything else because of the immigrant influx. And maybe our numbers are lower in this area, but there is a significant. Can you give us a sense of? I know we have some graphics on the national and on the state level. So can you give us a sense of immigration? As I flip through these pages, let me see if I can
Well, we
find
could
the
start
right one.
with the one produced by Brookings.
Okay. This is Brookings,
Yeah,
yes.
if you go to page 3.
Okay. So immigrants in 2010, Metropolitan America, a decade of change.
Right.
And then we're going to go to page 3, you say.
Yeah.
Okay.
And here it really just gives you kind of that historical perspective on immigration in the U.S. You can see in the 70s, the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, we've had a pretty consistent growth of foreign-born in the United States. And that growth has really stimulated a lot of response from people who were here before those various waves of immigrants were coming in. So you have kind of an anti-immigrant movement or things that have anti-immigrant sentiment to it. But you also have movements, social movements that are supporting immigrants, that are trying to help integration process. But it's really common, again, like I say, for people to respond very strongly and with fear, their fear of the unknown when you have change. People don't know what's going to happen. They worry about, is my neighborhood going to change? Am I going to be able to sell my house? And some of them are based on stereotypes. Others, neighborhoods do decline. So there's just a lot of uncertainty. So we've really actually experienced about 4 decades of rapid change in our
rapid change. One of every time I see this particular one, this is in millions of people. And I don't know if you have it handy, but as percentage of the population, the influx, the recent influx of the last 20, 30 years is actually not much more than it was in the early 1900s.
Yeah, it's actually very, very similar in terms of the change of the sort of human landscape. And that was also a time actually. It's very interesting. There's a lot of things that we can compare between those two times. There was also a strong reaction towards immigrants during the early 1900s as well. Local policies were being enacted both to help immigrants and also to determine what the norm is, what acceptable behavior is, how we want you to use your house, where we want you to work, what the hours are. So it's actually kind of a similar time. There's some differences, obviously.
Well, what I find is that the actions are similar, the attitudes are similar, except that
they're different immigrants.
Different immigrants. Right now, it's the brown ones or whatever you want to say. But before, they were the dark ones too, because they were Southern Europe or Eastern Europe. They weren't, or they were the Italians, or they were the Jews in Philadelphia. Jewish people not welcome, and it's like, what? To think of Philadelphia now without its Jewish or German populations is to me crazy.
Yeah.
But so I might say the origin of the people was different, but really the attitude seemed to be.
If you go down one more page, there's actually I wanted to point out one difference between sort of the two big waves of immigrants.
This is the
right
portal
there.
cities. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I see.
One of the big differences that we're seeing today is that early immigrants went to cities, and we have your classic sort of what they call gateway cities. New York, Chicago.
Yeah, those are these.
Los Angeles. Yep. Those are the places that historically have had many, many foreign-born residents. Yep. But today, and this has actually been more so in the last decade, more and more immigrants are now going to the suburbs. They're moving to small towns and rural places that traditionally have not had immigrants, and they're unprepared for immigrants. So some of that sort of response is like, oh goodness, what do we do? We have people in our community, and no one can communicate with them. And so there is a reason for anxiety. We're having trouble communicating. Things aren't working well. People aren't able to get what they need. So this is actually a pretty dramatic shift. And so what you're finding is that new cities are becoming these centers of immigration.
Okay. So in this case, in 80, this were the cities, and it looks like the cities have increased, but the suburbs have increased a lot more.
Yeah, almost. I think actually it just went over in 2010. Yeah, it's over 50% of immigrants now are moving straight to the suburbs.
Yeah.
So they skip the cities altogether. Instead of going to Chicago, they might go to Springfield or Champaign. And we normally don't think of ourselves as immigrant sort of receiving places for immigrants, and now that's the norm.
Yeah, and we weren't the gateways, and yet we are in a way.
Becoming the new gateways is what it's been called.
Yeah.
New gateways.
Yeah, and I find that curious here in Urbana-Champaign because there are some people that come from Chicago that were there, but a lot of people are just arriving directly here. They come as either refugees or otherwise, and this is their first American town.
Yeah, I mean, there's some reasons for that. Jobs have decentralized. Certain kinds of jobs you can't get in the city, and they're more, they've slowly moved out to the suburbs. Historically, you had immigrants going to the cities for manufacturing, sort of industrial jobs, and as we've deindustrialized, the kind of jobs that immigrants are taking are more in the service area, and those tend to be, they're all over the place, and they're not necessarily all concentrated in the cities. Sometimes people want the lifestyle as well. Small town, if you're moving from a rural area, a lot of times immigrants they feel more comfortable in a small town, a rural area. The big cities is not what they're used to.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of reasons why we see the shifts.
I had a banker yesterday ask me, why Arcola?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's what people call chain migration, that, one family will go and settle in a place, and then they'll get the word out, like, come here, this is a nice town, I'll help you get a job, and then pretty soon you'll have people, that network spreads out, and then the whole town, will move into this place like Arcola. I don't know the whole story with Arcola, but
no, there are two towns from Mexico, but especially one where, in fact, my friend there I went over there. I want to see where they came from, because it's a much prettier, he says, than here. But
so I was just going to suggest that we look at a map that kind of shows that transition.
Is that this map?
This one, yeah.
Okay.
This is the states with the largest and fastest growing immigrant populations. So if you scroll up, just so we can see the legend.
Yeah.
So the blue states are the ones that historically have received a lot of immigrants: California, Illinois, Texas, Florida, New York, New Jersey. But now the states that are actually receiving a lot more immigrants are these states that we don't think of as immigrant states: Nevada, Utah,
Virginia. Well,
a lot of southern states. Actually.
North Carolina, South Carolina. No wonder they're...
Even places like Minnesota as well are also getting large numbers of immigrants. This just shows the top 10.
Yeah.
But it just gives you a sense that the distribution is really changing. And that means that communities are having to think about how to serve a more diverse population, people with different kinds of needs.
And actually what I see is swing states too, given the recent elections.
Yeah. It's also reviving some particular towns. Some towns that have lost population or had an aging population, the immigrants have moved in, kind of stimulated the local economies. And that's been a little bit of a strategy in the old industrial cities. They're seeing immigrants as something that will help boost their economy, take over vacant houses or old commercial areas and, put in energy and money and get those things looking a lot better. You do see examples of that here and there, even here in Champaign.
Stacy, I couldn't have transitioned better to the other part. It looks like you're leading me straight to it. So tell me more then about the positive contributions of the presence of immigrants, and then maybe we'll lead on to the project then that we'll be seeing in a few segments here.
Yeah, sure. Well, increasingly, it's in part in response to sort of a very strong anti-immigrant movement in the country. A lot of people have actually been trying to document the benefits of immigrants. So some of they're trying to respond to this idea that immigrants cost us money. And so the sort of counterpoint is actually they're contributing to the economy. They're paying taxes, they're paying for goods and services, and those kinds of things. So they're kind of injecting money instead of taking money.
So is that, it almost sounds like they went out to look for the evidence for what they wanted to say.
Well, I think you find that with any controversial topic.
Okay.
But if you look at some of the stories that are emerging, you do actually see evidence of that. More and more places are saying, we had this strip mall, it was run down, no one was using it. As our immigrant population has grown, sometimes they go to places that are more affordable rent. They open a small business, then there's another business and another business. Pretty soon the whole strip mall is full of businesses supporting the immigrant community. That means sale tax for the local government. You have a property that is no longer just sitting there vacant, so it's being cleaned, it's being improved. So, it's hard to say. I think that there's value in both sides. Sometimes the benefits are uneven. So if you have two cities right next to each other, one city may be bearing more of the service cost, another may be benefiting from the economic gains. So there can be some distribution.
I'm just thinking, as you were talking about that, we have our own example down here on Vine and University. Now I can get my tortillas, I can get my dress, I can get my meat, I can get, and soon I'll be able to have my ice cream in paletas from, what are they called, artisan made and all that. And I'm like, I'm getting a full shopping center of different options of things that I would go to Chicago for. And now I'm getting them here.
Yeah, you can keep putting that money into the local economy.
You know, and not that I wouldn't want to put money in the local economy, but I was willing to travel. And now I just have to go 5 minutes. So
yeah, you don't have to do a 2-hour commute to grocery shop.
Yeah, that's kind of like it.
There's lots of other benefits. I mean, there's lots of studies on the benefit of diversity in terms of, you know, opening one's mind to new ideas, to new people, recognizing that there isn't just one way to do something. I've read studies about kids who grew up bilingual. They recognize there are 2 words for the same thing, and then they become more open-minded about more abstract concepts. So, you know, there's some sort of more softer, fuzzier benefits. And
good food.
Good food. I mean, you know, again, I think some of the challenges is that there's uncertainty with newness, and it doesn't necessarily newness with immigrants, but any kind of change. If you're if you see a new, you know, commercial building being put up next to you, you kind of wonder, is there going to be traffic, noise, litter? So the same things with immigrants. People have misconceptions, and they're not sure about what it means to have new people moving in, and so you have this back and forth of trying to say, okay, well, there are problems and there are positives with any kind of change.
So do we want to cover those studies now? Should we save that for a different opportunity? Because I'm mindful of the time to try to cover as to what's coming up and what your larger purpose.
Yeah, well, we could talk about the course I'm teaching. Is
Okay.
that what you want to do?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so I developed a new course. I've been teaching it for a couple years now, called Local Policy and Immigration. It's a class that's for graduate students. And this semester we started a project to look at immigrant-friendly communities. Kind of what is an immigrant-friendly community? What do we mean by immigrant-friendly? And what are places doing to make themselves immigrant-friendly?
Okay.
So the students in the class, we divided different kinds of strategies up, and they've been doing research on the topics.
Okay.
So I can give you some examples. Do you want some
Yes,
examples?
in fact. Let's. I guess what I'm hoping is today we get like an overview, and then we'll invite those students to come and tell us about their deeper research. But I'd like to see like a frame for it, or, you know, how does it all fit?
Okay, so we tried to look at different elements of integration and picking the different kind of case studies. So we have, you know, one is on more political integration, looking at how different communities are enacting local voting rights for all residents of a community, regardless of your immigration status. So I had a student looking at that. Another student is looking at immigrant centers, so physical places where immigrants can go and get information, receive services, or find out where to go for services.
I know our local school districts are thinking about a center like that for both school districts, and so
And sometimes there's value in having a center where they can get all kinds of information, especially when you have a lot of numbers and you find that people are you're having to repeat a lot of information. Sometimes it's good just to kind of bring a lot of different kinds of information and people together. So that's another project.
Should I be showing visuals during this time? I think you had sent.
Actually, yeah, we can. Another one is kind of the economic focus. We can look at Chicago.
Oh, that's right. There was a Chicago. This one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is actually a really exciting initiative that one of the students is going to be talking about.
Okay.
The mayor wants to create Chicago as the most immigrant-friendly city in the nation. So they've developed a very comprehensive plan for that. They passed a welcoming city ordinance, and they're really trying to promote the immigrants that are living in Chicago. Not necessarily to attract more. I mean, but to really help those who are already in the city. So we're finding that they're doing all kinds of interesting things, like having what do you call it, like kind of an expo fair for local small businesses. Pop-ups, that's what it is, pop-ups. You know, in neighborhoods that have a lot of immigrants, to provide the services on getting permits or, you know, translating information. So really facilitating their entry into formalizing businesses and that kind of thing. And they have a nice plan that's on the web. We don't have it up here, but they have a plan that you can download.
We'll bring it up when we bring the student.
Yeah, she'll highlight that.
Okay.
Let's see. Oh, another student is working on this idea of storytelling, encouraging immigrants to tell their story, and as a way to both empower themselves and also to let other people know about their story. You know, letting people know about the human side of immigrants as a way to connect non-immigrants and immigrants. So I'll have a student talking about that, and then finally one student will talk about the idea of a promotora, which is promotora.
From the word promo.
Promote.
Promote.
Right.
Okay.
Sometimes that can be thought of as a liaison, but it's, I think, a little bit more so. They're trying to integrate two groups together, figure out how these people here can get these services, and it's someone who's culturally aware of the immigrant group. Maybe they speak the language, they were an immigrant themselves, or they're from the community. And it's a strategy that healthcare services are using, other kinds of social services are using to help immigrants not be afraid to access local services.
My question in each one of those situations is, how does that, what would it look like here, right? Because I have found that many of the services that I would traditionally have under the multicultural section of the city in Philadelphia, I actually find that the county health department does its own, and they do their own outreach, or the schools. Each one of the school districts has specific people to do that, but the rest of the school district is also welcoming, and maybe we'll invite them too. But I find that, not that it's scattered, but it seems to be more integrated. It's like we're using the regular structures, if you will, to do those same services.
Yeah,
and so
I think you'll find little bits of it in this community. There's some things that we do really well and other things that we're just experimenting with. Some of these things nonprofits are doing. Others are partnerships between a nonprofit and a local government, or particular like healthcare or public health and a nonprofit might be working together, or the hospital could be working. So a lot of them are collaborations, especially in a small community. It's really hard for one place to do everything. And so you need people who have the trust with the local immigrant community. You need people who have the ability to make changes when you need to make changes. Sometimes you need a little money to grease the wheel, but it doesn't always have to be a lot. I mean, sometimes these things can be volunteer and then develop into more formal
Well, it'll be
programs.
interesting to explore then each one of those subtopics with a deeper understanding of each one, and then get feedback from people to see what else they'd like to see, or where it is. We're running out of time, but in this introduction of you to then the TV program, I'd like to see, so what else could we cover, in the sense of you have a research plan into which this fits? Can you tell us a little bit about that, so that we can get a sense of where you might be going and where it would be fun for us to explore here on CU Immigration Forum?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. So one area that I'm really interested in looking at is the role of nonprofits in doing things that we have traditionally thought of for local government to do. The nonprofits are really kind of filling a gap with immigrants. They're really integral in bringing immigrants into different kind of planning processes. So I'm really interested in looking at how nonprofits are responding to population changes, and seeing that role that they're taking, and how it's happening now. So I don't have anything grand to say, but historically nonprofits have often filled the gaps. So community organizations, nonprofits, even voluntary groups. So looking at that a little bit. I'm also really interested in just continuing with this kind of case study work of places that are calling themselves immigrant friendly. What are they doing? How are they doing it? Where does it work? Where does it fail? What areas are they immigrant friendly? They might be very immigrant friendly for the high-end, very wealthy immigrants, but maybe not so for undocumented. So kind of looking at the range of strategies that local governments are using. And because I'm in urban planning, I'm really interested in what urban planners are doing. Where do they fit into this?
So the official side and maybe the private sector side,
and how they work together.
Well, that'll be very interesting to keep on exploring.
Have me back in 10 years.
Well, 10 years.
No, I'm
now
just kidding,
you keep working on it. We like to see research in progress.
That's fun. And this class has been really great for that. Just looking at things in real time.
Okay. Well, that'll be very fun to bring those students in, and we want to thank you for coming. It's another issue of CU Immigration Forum TV, but for us, it's the positive side is as much fun as the advocacy side that's happening all around us. So thank you very much for coming.
Thanks
Stacey.
for having me.
Dr. Harwood, for others. Thank you very much for being with us with CU Immigration TV, and we hope you'll join us next time. Thank you very much. This is Ricardo Diaz.